Hey, welcome! What you're about to hear isn't just a story, it's my story. It's about the moment everything fell apart and how I picked myself back up. This is about heartbreak, about betrayal, and about discovering that you're so much stronger than you ever realized. So take a breath with me, get comfortable, and let's dive into this together, because I promise you this journey will change how you see yourself. My name is Maya, and 3 years ago, I thought I had my entire life figured out. I worked as a marketing manager at this amazing company in downtown Seattle. I had a beautiful apartment with floor-to-ceiling windows that I absolutely loved. And then there was him, James. He was my person, the one I told everything to, the one I trusted more than I trusted myself. We met at work, and it was that kind of connection where everything just felt easy. He understood me without me having to explain. Or at least, I thought he did. I was 28 years old, making good money, feeling confident about where I was headed. Life felt full of possibility, and I genuinely believed that James was going to be the part of my future forever. But here's what they don't tell you about life. Sometimes the people closest to you are the ones who hurt you the deepest. One Friday evening, I decided to surprise James. He'd been working so hard, staying late at the office, or so I thought. I grabbed his favorite takeout from that Thai restaurant he loved, picked up some wine, and headed to his apartment. I remember feeling so excited, so happy. I was literally smiling the entire drive over. When I got to his place, I noticed his apartment door was slightly open. That was strange because James was obsessed with security. My stomach did this weird flip, but I told myself I was being paranoid. I pushed the door open gently, and that's when I heard it. Laughter. Their laughter. Coming from his bedroom. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I didn't even feel anything in that first moment. I just stood there, frozen, holding that container of pad thai, watching the woman I considered my best friend walk out of his room half-dressed, looking absolutely shocked to see me. It was Sarah. My Sarah. The girl who I'd known since college, who I told my deepest secrets to, who I thought would have my back for life. The days after that were honestly the hardest days of my entire life. I couldn't sleep. I'd lie awake at night, replaying everything in my head, trying to figure out when it started, how many times it had happened, whether they'd laughed about me together. I couldn't eat. Food tasted like nothing. I'd make myself toast and just stare at it for 20 minutes, unable to take a single bite. I couldn't think straight. I kept calling out of work, making excuses, pretending I had the flu. But really, I was just sitting in my apartment, watching Sarah's Instagram stories, seeing James like her photos, watching them live their lives like I didn't exist, like what they'd done was just this small little thing that didn't matter. And you know what the worst part was? Everyone took sides. Some people stopped talking to me, others acted like they didn't know what to say. It felt like I wasn't just losing him and her, I was losing my entire social circle. But somewhere in that darkness, in that pain that felt like it would literally consume me, I made a decision. I was sitting on my bathroom floor one night at 3 a.m. and I made myself a promise. I decided that I was not going to let this define me. I was not going to spend the next year seeking revenge or trying to make them feel as bad as I felt. People always say that the best revenge is success. When I first heard that, I thought it was the most ridiculous thing I'd ever heard. But then I realized something. They were right. Just not for the reason I initially thought. I didn't want revenge to make them suffer. I wanted it because I needed to prove to myself that I was worth more than this. That I was worth more than being someone's backup plan or their dirty secret. So I started small with just one commitment. I was going to become the absolute best version of myself. I started waking up at 5 a.m. No exceptions. I'd go for runs, 5, sometimes 10 kilometers, just me and my thoughts and my music. The physical exhaustion actually helped. It was like I was running away from the pain, but also running towards something better. I began reading everything. Business books, memoirs, psychology textbooks, self-help guides, all the things I never had time for when I was busy trying to keep a relationship alive with someone who clearly didn't deserve me. I enrolled in online courses, digital marketing, advanced analytics, personal development, communication skills. I spent my evenings learning instead of scrolling through social media, watching them live their lives. My apartment became my sanctuary. It became the place where I didn't talk about what happened. I didn't post inspirational quotes about heartbreak. I didn't share my pain with strangers on the internet. I just quietly, relentlessly focused on becoming better. Every tear I cried, I channeled into my work ethic. Every memory that made me ache, I turned into fuel. Every moment I felt like I wasn't enough, I used it as proof that I needed to work harder, be smarter, think bigger. The silence was everything. Nobody knew what I was doing. Nobody knew about my 5 a.m. runs or my new certifications or the business plan I was working on in my spare time. And that was exactly the point. For 2 years I worked. Not at my job, though I was promoted 3 times there, which was nice. But I really worked on myself, on my future, on creating something that was entirely mine. I started freelancing. I took on clients outside of my main job. I built my portfolio. I learned the skills that companies were actually willing to pay premium prices for. And then, 18 months into this journey, I made the leap. I quit my job and started my own consulting firm. It was terrifying. It was the scariest decision I've ever made. But you know what? It was also the most liberating. My business was small at first. I worked from coffee shops and my apartment. Some months I barely made enough to cover my rent. But I kept going. I kept showing up. I kept believing that this was worth it. And slowly, almost without me noticing, things started happening. Clients started referring other clients. My reputation grew. My prices went up. My confidence grew with every success. 2.5 years after that horrible night in James's apartment, I got invited to speak at a major industry conference in Seattle. They wanted me to talk about building a business from scratch, about personal branding, about the exact things I'd been living. I was nervous about it, but also proud. This was my thing now. This was what I'd built. I walked into that conference ballroom feeling confident in my navy suit and my new heels, ready to share my story with a room full of entrepreneurs. And then I saw them. James and Sarah were standing by the registration table, deep in conversation. I barely recognized them, not because they looked that different, but because I felt completely different looking at them. There was no spike in my heart rate, there was no pain, there was just recognition, like seeing people from your past in a dream. James looked up and made eye contact with me. I watched his face change when he realized who I was. I just smiled. Not a mean smile, not a triumphant smile, just a genuine, calm smile, and walked right past them. After my keynote speech, which went amazingly, by the way, Sarah found me at the networking reception. I was talking with a potential client when she approached, and honestly, my first instinct was to walk away. But I didn't. I was past that now. "Maya," she said, and her voice was different, quieter, more uncertain. "That was incredible. You were incredible." I turned to her and I studied her face for a moment. "Thank you," I said simply. She started talking and I could see that she was struggling. She apologized. She said she'd made the biggest mistake of her life. She said she and James weren't even together anymore, that she'd been miserable, that she thought about what she'd done to me constantly. And I listened. I actually listened, not to make her feel worse, but because I was genuinely curious about why people do the things they do. But I also realized something fundamental in that moment. Her suffering didn't make me feel better. Her regret didn't heal my wounds. The only thing that healed me was the work I did on myself. "I'm not angry anymore," I told her honestly. I was, for a long time. But anger was just another way of staying connected to what happened, and I needed to let go. Over the next few months, I learned through mutual friends what had happened to them. James and Sarah's relationship lasted about 6 months after I found out about them. He ended up losing his job about a year later because of some poor decisions he made. Last I heard, he'd moved back home with his parents. Sarah never quite recovered professionally. She lost her job too, ended up having a really rough breakup, and kind of just disappeared from everyone's radar. Did I feel good about that? Honestly, at first I thought I would. I thought their suffering would somehow balance out mine, but it didn't, because I realized that success for me wasn't about them failing. My success wasn't even about them anymore at all. By that point, they were just ghosts, people from my past that had no connection to my present. While they were dealing with their consequences, I was building something real. My consulting business grew beyond what I'd even imagined. I hired my first employee, then my second. I moved into a real office space. I started getting invited to speak at events across the country. But more than that, I got to know myself. I discovered that I'm actually funny. I'm ambitious. I'm resilient. I'm creative in ways I never knew. I learned that my value doesn't depend on someone else loving me. My worth doesn't increase or decrease based on who's by my side. I learned that what happened to me, that betrayal, it didn't have to define my future. It was just the beginning of my story, not the end of it. About a year and a half into my business, I met someone. Not in some dramatic, fate-filled way. I met him at a conference, actually. His name was Marcus, and he was quiet, thoughtful, genuinely kind in ways that didn't seem performative. He didn't sweep me off my feet. He didn't promise me the world. What he did was show up consistently, listen when I talked, celebrate my wins, and support me without trying to be the center of my story. And I realized something crucial. When you heal yourself, when you build a life that makes you proud, you attract different people, better people who appreciate you for who you actually are, not who they want you to be. I didn't need Marcus to complete me. I was already complete. So what we built together was something better. It was a partnership between two whole people who chose each other. Life has this weird sense of timing. About 2 years after that conference, I ran into James. It was at a grocery store of all places. We both reached for the same bottle of wine at the same time. And when we looked up and recognized each other, something shifted. He looked at me, really looked at me, and I could see it in his eyes. He could see what I'd become. He could see that I was happy, successful, confident, and complete without him. He apologized. He meant it, but I realized I didn't need his apology anymore. I'm glad you're doing well, I told him sincerely, and I meant it. If someone asks me now, did you get revenge? I smile and I tell them the honest answer. No, I didn't destroy him or Sarah. I didn't post angry things online. I didn't try to turn mutual friends against them. I didn't spend my energy trying to make them feel as bad as I felt. Instead, I did something much more powerful. I became someone who no longer needed revenge. I became someone who could remember that pain without being defined by it. I became someone who could see them and feel nothing. No hate, no love, no resentment. Just acknowledgement that they were part of my story, but not the authors of it. The real revenge, if you want to call it that, is that their opinion of me doesn't matter anymore. Their actions don't get to dictate my happiness. My success speaks for itself without needing them to witness it. So if you're sitting where I sat 3 years ago in the darkness of betrayal and the pain of being hurt by someone you trusted, I want you to know something. This isn't the end of your story. This is the beginning. Don't waste your energy trying to make them suffer. Don't spend your nights planning revenge. That energy is too precious. It's yours, and it belongs to your future, not your past. Build a life so incredible, so full of purpose and joy and accomplishment that the person who hurt you becomes completely irrelevant. Not because you're trying to make them jealous or prove them wrong, but because you're too busy living to spend time hating. Heal, grow, become. And one day, when you look back at the moment that broke you, you'll realize it was actually the moment that built you. Because the greatest comeback isn't about winning against someone else. It's about becoming a version of yourself that the old you wouldn't even recognize. That's real power. That's real revenge. That's real life.